Today, I'd like to tell you about my friendship, relationship, whatever you want to call it, with Rock Hudson. Um, it began, as many gay stories begin, with a friend of a friend, introducing us. I had met Jack Coates in the desert in Palm Springs when I went down for what I thought was a gallery opening in which Rock would be in attendance. So a friend of mine and I thought that would be a good thing to go to. And he wasn't there. We ended up in the desert with everybody but Rock Hudson, all these people who knew him and many who loved him. I fell in the sack with a guy named Jack Coates, who had been Rock's partner for lover, I think we called him that back then. He'd been his lover for 4 or 5 years, and I could see why, because Jack was an amazingly charismatic guy, very charming, balding, maybe even bald at that point, and he had a chest hair that was architectural in its swirliness, and we became friends. I thought I was in love, and he was very tactfully, making it clear that we weren't. He was actually dating a diver from Berkeley swim team, and whom I met subsequently through him. Anyway, you don't need to know all this. It's just stream of consciousness here. Jack took me to San Bernardino to see a production of John Brown's Body that Rock was starring in. It was, even then, I thought it was pretty awful. Rock was supposed to die, and when he hit the stage, it was like a timber falling. He was just this big, loud whomp. And it was not the best play. And I think he was told that it was an artistic thing and he should do it, so he did it. And afterwards, there was a line to meet him. So Jack led me back into this interior hallway leading up to Rock's dressing room. At the moment I got to Rock and shook his hand, the lights went out. And the only thing I could think to say was, this is certainly the opportunity of a lifetime. He laughed in the dark, and that's where our friendship began. But that was the moment for me. I don't know whether he felt anything at all. Some months later, I got the call that Rock was coming to San Francisco, and he put together a group of men to hang out with him. I was among them, and he really surprised me by standing up and saying, "I have a little reading I want to do." He had been down to the newsstand at the Fairmont Hotel and obtained a copy of the Bulldog edition of the San Francisco Chronicle, which means it was, the Bulldog edition was the one that came out the night before. And he stood up and he read the first chapter of Tales of the City. He knew I had written something, and he went to the trouble of figuring out what it was, and he read from it. He was a little drunk at the time, but it was charming, and I think he kind of figured it would get me into bed, and it did. The next night, as a matter of fact, he and his partner, Tom Clark, invited me to join them at La Bourgogne, this restaurant in the Tenderloin, very fancy restaurant. And we talked about, at that time, he knew I was an activist, a gay activist, and the subject came up of when and how he was going to come out. And I offered to write the story for him. I said I could do it. I'm the guy to do it, really, because I'm out and I know you. And his partner got a terrible look on his face and said, "Not until my mother dies." So that was a peculiar thing to say, I thought. But anybody who's fucking Rock Hudson would be very proud for his mother to know it. Anyway, at the end of that evening, we headed up the hill and to the hotel, and Tom kind of flaked out on us. He said, "I'm too tired. I'm going to go back and go to bed." And so he headed back up the hill, and Rock and I caught a cable car and headed up the hill together. It was fascinating to watch how the crowd reacted when they saw who he was. They were just, look, it's Commissioner McMillan. You know, that was the role he was playing at the time on Macmillan and Wife. And anyway, we got there. We found Tom already passed out in the bedroom, and so we went into the living room, and we're sitting there at opposite ends of the room, really, making conversation. And finally, Rock said, "Well, I should be over there, or you should be over here," which was the only signal I required. So we were there having a grand old time making out, but I wasn't up to the task, shall we say, in any way. It was just too intimidating. There was too much clouding it all for me. And finally, he got up and came over and sat next to me and said, "I'm just a guy like you. I'm just a regular guy like you." And I said, "No, you're not. And I'm Doris Day." And we had a bit of a laugh. I think no, it wasn't the first time he'd heard that, but it was the first time I'd gotten a chance to say it. So we had better success on subsequent visits, both to his home in L.A., which was called the Castle, and at the house itself in San Francisco itself. Chris was surprised to hear this. He thought my only part of the story was that I couldn't get it up, and that was that. But we had several other shots at it, and we did pretty well. He did have a legendarily large penis. It wasn't the prettiest one I'd ever seen, but it was the biggest. And memories. Most of all, what you need to know about Rock was that he was a very sweet man. He seduced the world, at least the world that I knew, by being so kind and attentive. And he knew that he thought everybody should have a lover. He had Tom Clark, who I thought was the world's worst lover because he was such a bitch. He was so grumpy and bossy with Rock. But Rock made it his mission to see that I found a lover. If you're too young to realize it, but back in those days, a lover was a husband. And that's what he wanted for me. And when he heard that I'd met somebody and gone on a princess cruise with him, on the Love Boat, no less, he insisted on meeting me at the dock. He drove down to San Pedro and met us at the dock. And I'll never forget the look on this woman's face when we were standing there at the rail waving at our friends. And she said, who's meeting you? And I said, that tall guy down there. And she said, "Oh my God, that's Rock Hudson." I won't pretend that I didn't enjoy that. I did. I felt like he was, in many ways, the confirmation of what I'd always believed about what gay life could bring you. It had brought me Rock Hudson, or at least as a friend. I was a fan of Rock for many, many years. I mean, I was in not only things like Giants, which were the height of his masculinity, but Pillow Talk and I think Lover Come Back he was in. There were 3 Doris Day movies he did, and they all made me love him. So to find myself in a frisky friendship, I think I'll call it, with him was an amazing thing. I was totally astounded that I wrote about it in a diary which I reflected on what it felt like to be at that house at the castle and to be a confidant of his. He had famous pool parties, and there were always these gorgeous young men that he kept a distance from. They weren't usually young, because he liked men who were 30 or over. Thank God. And I was 32 at the time, and Jack Coates was 32 at the time. And this party had these beauties, as far as I was concerned. They were really gorgeous guys. And he was standing on the edge of it, sort of critiquing them with me, asking me what I thought of this or that one. And I felt really intimate with him at that point. At one party, a fellow named Warren Seabury, I've never forgotten his name, who was a PR man in L.A., had shown up thinking he was going to crash the party, and he brought a star with him, Michelle Phillips, who was with the Mamas and Papas, if you remember. And I had to be the one. Rock said, he's brought a woman with him. So I had to be the troubleshooter who would go out and get rid of the woman. And when I realized it was Michelle Phillips, I was just dumbstruck. And so as usual, I felt like the truth was the only way out. And I said to her, I'm so sorry. Rock has just gotten back from a tour, and he's asked to have the 30 most gorgeous men in town meet him at the house. And she said, it's quite all right. I understand. I've left those instructions myself. She was a great sport. And I think Warren Seabury was mortified. Despite having these wonderful times with him, I was troubled by the Hollywood closet and what it required of him and of many of the people around him. On several occasions, I was asked to leave the house because Liz Taylor was coming by, or Nancy Walker, who was in the Macmillan and Wife, played the housekeeper in the Macmillan and Wife. These were sort of friends that were bridge friends, and it wasn't a sexual arena at all. And so I happily obliged to make life more comfortable for him. His best friends, his logical family, if you will, were George Nader, the former movie star. Well, I think he still was at that point, and Tom Clark, who was basically functioned as Rock's assistant. And they loved going out and doing things together, but they made sure to go out in odd numbers, carrying briefcases, so it looked like a business meeting and not a group of gay friends. That they followed that rule was just so alarming to me. So I had my world was San Francisco, where everybody was out, at least in San Francisco they were, and everybody felt no shame about who they were or who they could be seen with. That wasn't true of Rock and company. They were terrified that he'd be exposed in some way, and for good reason, because Confidential magazine was trying to do exposés on Rock all the time. On several occasions, his agent sold them another star, I think Rory Calhoun was one of them, that they could out if they didn't out Rock. It was an evil, evil place to be, Hollywood, even though it was a wonderful place to visit. So it started to put a strain on our friendship. I began to see its limitations. But I still gave him adventures when he wanted them. I mean, not with me at the end, but with other people. I took him to the glory holes in San Francisco, which the name explains itself. and to a leather bar called the Black and Blue. I remember seeing him standing there in a red alpaca sweater, looking every bit like a tourist from the Midwest, and getting no action at all. So I reached over and sort of pinched him on the butt, and he said. Then he turned around a moment later and said, "Was that you?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm just checking." He wasn't entirely. He loved those sexual scenes, but he wasn't entirely comfortable with them. I had to throw him into a booth at the Glory Holes and put somebody else in it just to get him some action. But we had fun together. We were friends and jokey friends, and I felt like I was helping him find himself. I ended up writing about Rock in further tales, but he was always called blank blank by the people who read the column because that's what was there in place of his name. I didn't make any effort to identify him too easily. A lot of people thought it was James Garner, for heaven's sakes. But I wanted a portrait. I wanted to do a portrait of a tortured movie star who's feeling trapped in the system. And I think I succeeded in doing that. Michael Tolliver meets him and gets it on with him. And, it was an affectionate portrait. And I never identified him at all. So Rock and I kind of, there wasn't any official falling out. I just stopped calling at the castle and just let it go where it had been a pleasant experience, but I didn't think I could deal with the duality of that experience. I was getting more famous at the time, frankly, and I was known for being an out-of-the-closet gay man. And I didn't want a secret affair or a secret friendship even with someone who wasn't. So it was a shock when I picked up the paper and realized that he'd been diagnosed as having AIDS. Shortly thereafter, Randy Shilts, who was my friend and a reporter at the Chronicle, who wrote the classic AIDS book and the band played on, called me and said, "You knew him, right?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And he said, "Do you want to comment on this?" And I thought about it for a while and said, "Yes, I do. I'd like to say something." So I granted him an interview in which I said that all the things I wanted to say about Rock, that he was a decent guy, a good man. He was widely known to be gay in Hollywood. They all pretended not to know it, but everybody knew Rock was gay. And he'd been caught in this trap that was now exposed him as a gay man with this terrible disease. I said all of that in the most affectionate way I could possibly say it, not realizing how quickly the shit was going to come down on me. The first indication was the old man that ran the flower stand on Castro Street clucked his tongue at me as I walked by, like, "Shame on you, shame on you." I had broken a rule that you weren't supposed to break. I had spoken about another person being gay. It was a secret society up until then, and it was supposed to be. And I didn't have a right, the word outing hadn't even been invented then, but they were making me feel as if I'd violated that code. People magazine picked up the story and quoted me and Mamie Van Doren, the old I won't call her a floozy. She was an actress from the 50s, were the only two people they could find that would say that Rock was gay. The people were running away from the story as fast as they could run because they didn't want to have to comment on it. I knew that my responsibility as the person I had become was to tell the truth. And so I did it as best I could. I got so much grief over it from the community, including a reporter for the BAR, who thought they were, defending the movie star against this base allegation. But my husband Chris tells me that he heard the news when he was a boy, a young man. How old were you?
15.
15. And that it made a big difference to him because he had felt alone up to that point. Now he knew this superstar was gay, and it gave him the strength to start becoming his own self. That's what I knew would happen, and it did happen. I did have fears that I was hurting Rock in some way. That's what bothered me the most, was that it had made life miserable for him in some way. And so I was really heartened to discover that when he hired a biographer to write his story, his true story, finally, he told her that I was the first person she should visit, that I would know what was what. And I was so happy that he recognized that. I didn't see him again, ever. He didn't have much longer to live, really, at that point, by the time he'd hired the biographer, even Sarah Davidson. But he did get 35,000 fan letters at the hospital when he was dying from people who said, "We don't care what your sexuality is. We love you just as you are." And he was moved by that, and as he should have been. I'm sure there would have been many more. And nowadays, it's not horrifying to people at all. He was the first, and it made him a pioneer in a sense. He owned himself and didn't apologize for himself, even though it had been a reluctant experience, I'm sure. But he saw what the value of it was and what he had to do in the end. What he had to do was to own his own truth. I knew at the time that there were lots of people, most of them who had some sort of financial connection to Rock's success, who didn't want him to come out. So I hoped that I was doing something that he actually wanted. He'd talked about it for years. They talked about the book always. Many years before Sarah Davidson wrote that book, they talked about the book. We'll save that for the book. That was going to be the way the truth would be told. And it didn't happen the way he planned on it happening, but I'm proud that I got him there in my own small way. And I treasure the memory of him still. I still get a little shiver when I watch his movies. The same shiver I got as a kid, but now with a layer of understanding over it that makes all those jokes in the movies make sense. His movies were filled with the references to a character that might be gay, or he was tiptoeing up on it all the time. But I'm just grateful I had the experience of knowing him, and I treasure that memory. And I'd like to think that I made a difference in his life in a way that he didn't plan on, but it served him in the end. So thanks for coming along today, and I look forward to the next time we meet.